We have a lot of people out. I know my family has been sick as a dog with all of this virus and the flu that's been going around, and it's been really quite, Shane's got terrible bronchitis, and Pappy's sick, and all the kids are sick, and it seems like everybody has been sick, so to have somebody here today is really a good thing. So we're glad that you're here. Chris and Tracy, this is really a big day in your life. It should be. It's a very special day. It's not only a special day for you, it's a very special day for our church. And what this means, you are the second person that we have ordained into the ministry in the last couple of years. James sent his greetings to you this morning. He's down in Fairfax, I think, and just couldn't be here today. So he wanted to be, but he couldn't. So it's just a special day, and I want it to be special to you in a lot of different ways. It's a day I want you to remember. We have a gift for you. Of course, you've seen it. And but we are, as your pastor and your friend, your mentor and your professor, I find this to be a great honor in my life, just to be able to preach and teach this ordination service. I want you to appreciate that as we begin the service, that this church has absolutely nothing to do with your calling, nothing, zero. God is the one that has called you. And the only reason that we are here today is to recognize that calling in your life, to confirm that we believe that you've been called by God, that you've been gifted by God, that your family believes that, obviously, and to just attest to what we believe God is doing in your life. You have everything that you need. I want to say that up front. You have everything that you need to be everything that God wants you to be. You will be given all of the gifts that you need. If you go to Romans chapter, what chapter is it? I forget what chapter. I think it's chapter 12, verses 5, 6, 7. In that area, it lists what I believe are called the ministry gifts for those of us that are pastors, leaders, servants, whatever it may be. Certainly everybody can have those gifts in their life. There's nothing that would prevent anyone from having those gifts of exhortation, the gift of teaching, gift of mercy, administration, whatever it may be. So you have been given, just by your call, you've been given everything that God wants you to have. There's no more of the Holy Spirit. There's no more of God to have. You've got all of that you can have. The gifts are something that you have to develop. You get the gift, and then you have to figure out how to develop it and how to actually use it. You've been teaching here at the church, for instance, and it's been good. We on Sunday nights, but you still have a lot to learn. You have a lot to learn. Alex, this is for you as well. We all do. Just because we have a gift doesn't mean that it's operating at 100% full speed ahead, as if we know exactly how to use it. So I want to just encourage you to just accept the fact that God has called you. He's given you everything that you need to be what he wants you to actually be. So the only thing that we are doing is just confirming. Today's confirmation for you. I want to say to you up front that the ministry is not a job. It's not a job. This is not a career. This is not a trade that you have. This is not a profession. I don't care how many degrees that you get. I don't care if you get 14 doctorate degrees and 10 master degrees. That's not what makes you a minister of Christ. It's God's calling on your life. It's God's giftedness to you. And so this is a distinct and divine visitation of God on your life. It's very distinct. We are a small congregation, but not everybody is divinely visited with this kind of visitation from God. It's a supernatural visitation from God. And my understanding is that it can never be reversed. Now, that's just my understanding. There may be some people that actually disagree with that. They would say, well, you can certainly, you can disregard your calling, you can live in sin and all those kind of things, and that's true. But Romans chapter 11, if you'll turn there real quick, Romans chapter 11 and verse 29 is a really very important verse. This is talking about the sovereignty of God in the life of Israel, but I think that the principle here is the same for you as it is for any of us that have been called into the ministry. It says in verse 29 that the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. And if you go out and you look up that word irrevocable, it literally means that God is not going to change his mind. He's not going to say, well, oops, I made a mistake. I wish, there probably was somebody else better suited for the job. There are plenty of men that have run from their calling. Moses ran from it. He went into the desert. Jonah ran from it. That wasn't a good ending for him, right? There have been plenty of men that abandoned their calling, especially throughout the Old Testament. But the calling that God places on your life, you think about somebody like Samson. And Samson was a man that God had gifted in a lot of different ways. It wasn't just one way. It wasn't just that he was strong, but God had given him other gifts, and he abandoned those. He made a really, really bad choice in his life. And when he told Delilah that he was if she would cut off his hair, that he would lose his strength. His hair had nothing to do with his strength, absolutely nothing. They could have shaved it off bald, and it would not have made a difference in the world. What happened is that he lost his commitment to God. He lost his commitment to God. He had already lost it. He touched the unclean thing. He reached in to get some honey. And as a Nazirite, he wasn't allowed to do that. He couldn't drink anything from the vine. He had done that. And so he wasn't supposed to cut his hair. But none of those things in and of themselves represented why he was strong. When he shared his secret, if I can call it that, he lost his commitment to God. And even in the end, God still used him, which is miraculous to me. God put Jonah in the belly of a whale, and he still used him. So we have a lot to learn from those men in the Old Testament that have failed in their commitment to Christ. I want to encourage you never to lose your commitment to Christ. That ought to be obvious. Your calling is permanent. You don't have to worry later on next year whether or not God called you or God doesn't want you to be in the ministry. God does want you to be in the ministry, and he wants you to develop all of the gifts that he is going to give to you so that you can be a pastor, you can be a servant, you can be a leader. I'd like to just spend the whole day talking about this morning what it means to be a leader, but I'm not. Not only is this a permanent calling, but in my mind, it carries with it the highest standards on the planet. It carries with it the highest standards on the planet. You cannot take your life lightly. You cannot just do things flippantly and in a frivolous way. It's just not, you can't do that in the ministry. Every day counts, every person counts, every decision that you make, it counts. You have to be alert, you have to be wise in the decisions that you make. No one enters into the ministry fully prepared. I would say, and I'll say this, I'm going to, just since Alex is here, I'm going to just say for all of us, that once you enter into the ministry, you are on a huge learning curve. It's a huge learning curve. It's a lifetime learning curve. You never get off of it. It will always be there. And so nobody, it doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter how many degrees they have, nobody actually enters into the ministry fully prepared for what actually lays ahead of them. There are a lot of problems, there are a lot of pitfalls that will certainly confront you along the way. But ministry is, when it's done properly, in my mind, is something that is built on learning things the hard way, learning things the difficult way. I don't, just from my own personal experience, which is fairly minimal probably to a lot of people's, I don't find that the lessons that God has taught me, that any of the lessons have been easy. A lot of the lessons I've had to learn just because I was stupid. But there are just lessons that you have to learn the hard way. They are built around the life experiences that you have, the people that God brings into your life. We all have an impact on you. They're built around achieving success and failing ministry and failing in the ministry. Now, I want to say something to you that may sound a little strange to begin with, but I want to clarify it for you, that in the ministry, you got to write this down, that in the ministry, failure is not an option. In the ministry, failure is not an option. It's a necessity. Chris, it's a necessity. It's something that has to happen in your life. You will learn so much more from your failures than you ever will through your success. So if you feel like you're the person that you're never going to fail, you're never going to make any mistakes, good luck with that. You're going to fail. And in my mind, it's because when you fail, you learn what not to do. If I could go back and just change my life and just go through the areas where I felt like I failed, where I failed miserably, I would have to go back many, many years. And I think that you fail more, I'm just going to say this, that you fail more in the beginning. Because you have all these dreams, you have all these expectations, you have all of these ideas, and you want to implement everything that you can, and you can't. Let's just say that you went into another church and you became the pastor at that other church. You don't know anybody, you don't know their life, you don't know the problems that they have in the church, you don't know any of that. You probably don't even have any friends if you were to move and go somewhere else. Failure is actually the tuition that you pay for success. Failure is the tuition that you have to pay for success. And that's a good lesson to learn up front. So you have to be willing to fail. You have to let others, I'll talk about this in just a little bit, you have to let other people show you where you were wrong. You may not always agree with them. You may not always trust their judgment in something, but you're still going to have to learn to let other people help you when you are wrong. You will be wrong. You will be wrong. I'll give you some examples in my own life today when I was wrong. I've been wrong many times. But I want to say this to you, and I want to say that recognizing that you're wrong is really difficult for leaders. It's really difficult for somebody that's in a position of leadership to just bear up to the news that I am wrong about this in my life. But I want to say something to you. I want you to hear my heart in this. If I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail betting on the church. Because I know that the gates of hell cannot prevail against God's church. So I'm going to bet on the church. I'm going to bet on it no matter what it looks like, no matter what the culture is changing about it, no matter what. I'm invested in the truth. I'm invested in preaching the word and teaching the word to the church. And I'm not going to apologize or be ashamed of the church. It's something that everybody needs to be a part of. Nobody enters into the ministry as knowledgeable as they need to be, no matter how much education and preparation they actually have. I know that you and Alex have heard me teach this in class, but the numbers are very frightening that over 50%, I read another percentage that I'm not even going to share with you. I just don't see how it could have been correct, but that over 50% of the men that graduate from the seminary and go into the ministry get out of the ministry within 5 years. Within 5 years. That's how discouraging the ministry can become to somebody that's not grounded in what God wants them to do. You cannot learn all the lessons of ministry in a classroom setting. No more than either one of y'all who are police officers could learn what it means to be in the field in a classroom. You can learn a lot, but until you get out there and somebody's shooting a gun at you, you just don't have any expectation as to how you may react. Every month, at least, as a minimum, over 1,500 pastors leave the ministry due to all kinds of issues, church issues, family issues. I read a statistic recently that said that probably 65 to 70% of wives of the wives of pastors wanted to get their husband to get out of the ministry. And the divorce rate among pastors is increasing at an incredible rate. So pastors leave the ministry. A lot of them leave the ministry due to burnout. If you go to a small church, if either one of you men go to a small church, they will expect you to do everything. Everything. Cut the grass, clean the church, whatever it may be. Teach everybody, visit the sick, visit everybody, Aunt Mary when she stubs her toe. They want you to do everything. They expect you to be there and do everything, and you cannot do everything. And it just leads to burnout when you feel like you have to meet everybody else's expectations. When I think about this, I think about the disciples, that they are an excellent example of men that were called into the ministry, but I don't think that they were actually prepared for what lay ahead of them. If you had told them, I was thinking about this earlier in the week, that if you had told if you could have videoed and showed the disciples what they were going to experience, and the persecution and being crucified upside down and beheaded and quartered and whatever it may have been, and put in boiling pots of oil, I don't know if they would have really wanted to do that. They had known what the ministry was going to lead them into, they may have chosen to stay at home and just go back fishing. So following Jesus was never designed to be safe. There's nothing about following Christ that's safe. It's I would say to you in a different way, it's sort of like walking through a spiritual minefield. If that's a good way to see it. I want to say to you, Chris, that the foundation of Christianity, and I think that the center of all pastoral ministry that God will give to you, all pastoral life, will always be the crucified Christ. Whatever you do in the ministry, no matter how you teach, you always have to be making Christ, Jesus the Christ, you always have to be making him the issue. In fact, I would say it a little different way. I would say that you have to be forcing him as the issue. You can talk to people about being a Christian, and they'll say, yeah, I'm a Christian, and all of this, and you know deep down in your heart that that's not true. You have to keep pressing the issue. The issue is whether or not you are actually a fully devoted follower of Christ. Not that you got baptized, not that you took the preacher's hand and you got some certificate from teaching a Sunday school class, or that your daddy was a deacon, or whatever it may be. Are you following Christ? Is always the issue in the church for everybody that's in the church. Are you a fully devoted follower of Christ, or are you just playing at Christianity? People won't like you for that. People won't really appreciate you for that position. Everybody that comes to church, they want to think, yeah, I'm a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ, but if he was here today, I doubt very seriously that he would go. And he went around from church to church, and he went up to Williams Church and over here to Hollow Creek, and came over here and went down to First Baptist and went to Corinth. Whether or not he would think that everybody in those congregations, no matter how much they attended and how long they had gone to church, whether or not they were fully devoted followers of Christ. Following Christ is always the issue. I want you to turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 23. Paul here is talking about Christ being the power and the wisdom of God. And he says the following, he says, but we preach Christ crucified. And to the Jews, that's a stumbling block, and to the Gentiles, to the Greeks, it's just foolishness. The cross and all of that to the lost man is just a joke. It's foolishness. That's kind of what the word means. You don't have to turn there, but Isaiah 8:14 and Romans 9:33 called Jesus a stumbling stone and a rock of offense. People are going to stumble over this offensive message of you are a sinner. And if you do not fully commit your life to Christ, that you will be carted off by some angel at some point into a place that you don't want to go to. That's a very offensive message to somebody that's intellectual and cultural and feels like they've got their act together and they know what they need to know. I've told you, I've taught on this, I'll keep telling you that your brain is about the size of a grapefruit. I eat a grapefruit every morning. It's about that big, and it's 70% water. And if I think that little grapefruit size brain that I have can figure out God and eternity and heaven and hell and Jesus and salvation and everything that goes along with that, good luck. Good luck. There's nowhere in the scriptures where Jesus is pictured as some comfortable, affluent, pleasant, happy-go-lucky, amusing character that everybody likes. Isaiah 53:3 says, he's despised and rejected by men. He's a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. He was brutally tortured. He was murdered. He was spit on. He was beaten, blindfolded, had his beard plucked out. That by itself is nothing but gruesome. But as we get closer to it all, as we really get down, we get into scriptures, we get closer to it all, it's the utter insanity of the cross that makes it so stinking glorious. It's the utter insanity of it. That God Almighty would send his Son, make him the God-man and kill him. It's just utter insanity to the lost man. To me, it's the most glorious truth that I know anything about. I have to make Jesus the issue in my life and in my ministry. This is the one who was everything, who had everything, and he left it and became nothing and had nothing. He told his disciples, he said, I don't even have anywhere to lay my head. He didn't own any property. He had never been to a school. He didn't have a home. He didn't even have a donkey. He had to go into town to be crucified. He had to borrow somebody's donkey, go to their room upstairs. He didn't have a thing. And that's the one that has called you into the ministry, and he is the one that you are to emulate. If I can say all this in a different way, you've got to make much of God. You've got to make much of Christ, and you don't want to make much of yourself at all. You want to make much of Jesus in your life and in your ministry. There's no saying that only what you do for Christ will last, and I believe that. I want to encourage you to spend a great deal of time. Alex, this is for you as well. I want to encourage you to spend a great deal of time, 1st, 2nd Timothy, and Titus. They are the 3 pastoral epistles that were written to pastors. Timothy was obviously Paul's protege for 15 years. Titus lived on the island of Crete, which was a very, very difficult place. The church that Timothy pastored was Ephesus, which was considered by most people, most theologians, to be the most difficult church in the New Testament. Some people think, well, it was Corinthians, they had all kinds of problems. No, it was Ephesus, with all of its idolatry, with all of its prostitutes and temple prostitutes coming down every morning, every evening. I made a list, and this is an incredibly exhortive place in the Scriptures. And I just want to read you a list of just some of the things that Paul tells Timothy and Titus. Tells them what to flee from. He tells them what to pursue. They encourage you to fight the good fight, to guard what God has committed to you. Trust. They tell you to hold fast to spiritual truth, to be strong in God's grace for your life, to not become entangled in the affairs of this life. Chris, I want to say to you as your pastor and your friend, don't get over involved in the affairs of this life if you want to be what God wants you to be. You are a pusher, you've got businesses, you've got 30 things going on at one time. I'm not telling you that they're wrong, you got to just drop them tomorrow. I'm just telling you, don't get entangled in the affairs of this life. I'm not telling you that, God's word's telling you that. It says that you need to endure hardship, to rightly divide the word of God, to never quarrel, to be gentle to your flock, to be patient with people, to correct error and disobedience with humility, to preach and teach the word, to be an encourager, to finish your race, to keep the faith, and much more. Good luck. All I can say is good luck. That's just some of the encouragements in those chapters. How many chapters? 12 chapters there. So I encourage you to spend time in these epistles and read them and study them and commit your life to them. I remember when I first got saved and I just could not stay out of the Scriptures. This was a long time ago, 53 years ago. And God, for some reason, I know now, I think why, but I just was led to 1st, 2nd Timothy, and Titus. I was young in the Lord. I didn't know anything. I just didn't know anything. I'd been to church all my life, still didn't know anything. I was just a complete idiot. spiritually. And but God led me to those books because they were so encouraging. They have so many verbs that are in the imperative mood, and that's where the encouragement comes from. So study them, read them, commit your life to them. Now, what I want to do is I want to share a number of principles that I've learned over the years. The most difficult issue that I had in developing this message, which I've worked on for several weeks, is that it was not what to say, it was what to leave out. I have so much inside of me that I want to say to you today, and y'all put a clock up there so I can't do it. I'm going to ignore the clock for a little bit. You're more important than that clock. I know that this can't endure any more than this can endure, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. So it was what to leave out. I've been here all day. Nobody would have wanted that. Some of these I have learned by just being stupid. Many of them I've learned through others that have invested their life in me over the years. Those kind of people are a treasure for your life. You ought to find as many people like that as you can and hang around them. Just hang around them. I believe that each of these principles are critical to your spiritual success, and I'm going to provide them in the first person plural. I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they. All right, I'm going to talk in terms of we, because I believe that we're in this together. And whatever I'm telling you is not just something that I've learned, it's something that I want to keep learning. So I started to do it in you. I went back and changed all of I said, well, if I do that, it's like I've got it all down pat, and I want to tell you that I don't. So here's the first one. If more than two people that we love and that we know that really care about us, if they suggest that we have a problem, then we should recognize that we probably do have a problem, and then do whatever we need to do to correct that problem. If just two people in your life that you love and trust. All right, I love my wife. I trust my life. I love you. I trust you. I love Eric and trust Eric. And if two of you came to me and said, Gary, we believe that there's something wrong in your life here, that it needs to be corrected, I need to listen to that. It's hard sometimes when you believe that you're the leader to have people come correct you. But they're your friends. There's a verse in Proverbs chapter 27 and verse 6 that says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Faithful are the wounds, the things that kind of hurt you, that are necessary in your life. If you see that I have something in my life that needs to be corrected, I love you enough that you can speak to me and you can share that with me. We cannot let our pride keep us from making the necessary changes that God wants us to make. The ministry, just by its very nature, demands that we're always to be growing and that we're always to be changing. We don't get a respite from that. I don't get relief from that. If I'm not growing, I don't need to be a pastor. If I'm not growing in my relationship to Christ, if it's not getting better and deeper and sweeter and I'm learning and I'm changing and I'm becoming more like Christ, I don't need to be in the ministry because I don't have anything to offer anybody. Everybody in this room, I don't care where you are spiritually, you need to change. You need to constantly be changing and constantly growing in your life. You and James, as well as my wife, came to me privately. All three of you came privately. and said, Gary, your messages on Sunday are too long. You remember doing that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You remember doing that? You do that every Sunday, don't you? So, here's 3 people that God has brought into my life that I know that they love me, they care about me. And your comment to me was that they were too long and that made them counterproductive. I remember one day, for all of you here, I'm not going to do it today, I preached for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and we had some people right where you are, Christy, and they got up and left. They said, we got to be in Florida in 5 hours and we'll never make it, or something like that. And it was after that you men came to me, and I appreciated it. And I want to tell you that I wanted to resist. It's the only time I get to teach. I give the other services up to you and James, so that you can teach and learn. And this is the only time that I get with the congregation, and I spend weeks, and I mean literally weeks, months studying. I spend hours every week on a message. I never get finished with it. I just have so much to say, and then I don't have enough time to say it, and it's very frustrating. If we go to class, you men are in class, I get 2 hours with you, and then you sit through another class, so I got you for 4 hours. And I probably got plenty of time to say what I need to say. But I've worked diligently to reduce the length of time that I teach. The lesson in this is that God not only speaks to us through His Word, but you can be assured that God is going to speak to you through people that love you and care about you. And you better listen to them. I think your wife is the most important. Your wife. Not me, your wife. When I become defensive, it's normally an indication that I'm not really paying attention to what God wants me to change. I get defensive about it. You know, hey, you don't understand. Well, maybe they do understand. My personal experiences have taught me that the more I think that I'm right and the people who love me are wrong, normally I am the one that's wrong. That's a hard lesson to learn, but it's worth it. Number 2, we can play the part or we can live the part. Most pastors, myself included, we feel like we have an image that we have to protect. We don't want anybody to just look at us and think that we're not spiritual people. We actually want them to think that we're more spiritual than we actually are. I'm just a normal guy. I go through the same pains and hurts and that everybody does. I'm just a normal person. For some strange reason, though, we think that we have an image that we have to protect, and so we're often inclined to say the right things but not actually live out what we say. I think this happens all the time in the ministry. I'll give you an example. When somebody comes up to us and shares a prayer request from us, and they say to us, they share something and they say, would you please pray for me? And every time I never say, no, I'm not going to pray for you. Ever. I mean, you're never going to hear me say that. People call me, they text me, will you pray for me? Will you pray for me? And every time I say, yeah, I'm going to pray for them. And there have been plenty of times when I didn't pray for them. All right? What was I doing? I was playing the part, but I wasn't living the part. I got me a prayer journal. If you call me, if anybody in this church calls me and says, will you pray for me? I go open up my prayer journal and put it in there so I will not forget. I had to learn the lesson the wrong way. I was playing the part. I wanted my image to be protected. And a lot of times, this playing the part, it should be very revealing when that happens, that we're much more concerned about our image than just being honest. That's a bad trait. Number 3, this one will sting. This one will hurt. This one hurts me. We have absolutely nothing to bring to the table. I have nothing, you have nothing to bring to the table. This has been very humbling to me as I've learned this lesson over the years. The only thing that I have to bring to this church or my students is what God has given me and no more. I don't have any more. I don't. I'm not the author of truth. I didn't give truth. All I can do is just give back to somebody else what God has given to me. It's His truth. It's His word. If Sunday after Sunday I only brought what I had to bring, then everybody would leave utterly empty week after week after week after week. I develop messages. I think I'm ready for this message, and right in the midst of it, God just completely just sends me off into a different direction, not on a Sunday morning like some people. I start going over the message. I want to get every word right. I want to refine what I'm saying, and then all of a sudden God just keeps changing the message. I've reduced this to 4 pages. I had 10, 11 pages of notes that I had developed for this message. And then God just started just refining everything and changing everything, and it just changing and this refining process never ends. Chris, I want to encourage you that if that changes in your life, you're not hearing God. You have to let God speak to you and change what you think is the best for what He knows is the best for your people and for your congregation. It always humbles me that what I wanted to say, God just says, well, it's not really what I wanted you to say. I want you to say something else. I want to say that Sunday after Sunday, I feel completely inadequate. I never get up here on any Sunday. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been teaching Bible studies for nearly 5 decades. I have all the experience in teaching that a person could have, and I still feel inadequate, and I'm grateful for it. The last thing I want to do is to not feel inadequate. And I ask myself, why do I feel that way? It's because God has convinced me that I don't have anything to bring to the table. I want to think that I do. I want to think that I've been a teacher for a long time. I want to think that I have a lot of wisdom and understanding and knowledge that I can bring to somebody and give to somebody, that I have what they need. However, what I have learned is that Jesus is the only one that has everything that everybody needs, not me. That may sound a little light. He's the only one. All that we can do, and absolutely no more, is just be a vessel through which His life flows. And if that's not happening, we're not ministering. It has to be His life flowing through you, flowing through me. I love the song that we sing. Julie, you'd appreciate this. Yet not I, but Christ in me. When Micah's here, not keeping the baby, Elliot, we sing that song. Yet not I, but Christ in me. I think about Isaiah when he saw God in Isaiah 6. If you want to know what it's like for God to tell you that you don't have anything to bring to the table, all you have to do is to go read Isaiah chapter 6. And if you remember the story of Isaiah, he was there before God, and he could see the Lord. He was high and lifted up, and he saw things that we'll never see until we die and get to go be with God in glory. And he saw these things, and an angel came and took a coal out of the fire, and he touched his lips with it, and Isaiah just fell down on his face, and he said, God, I am a man of unclean lips. Listen, if I understand the scriptures correctly, Isaiah was the most godly man on the planet at that time. I'll say that again. He was the most godly man on the planet at that time in his life. He was if you go read him compared to somebody like Amos or Hosea, he is a scholar. He is brilliant. His language is just way above the way that other people taught. But at that moment, when he saw God for who he really was, his entire life changed. And I asked myself, why was that? It's because at the very moment that we see God for who he really is, at that moment we really finally see ourselves for what we really are. If you took God, if you had a picture, if God was here physically and you could see him and you could see me or any of us beside God, we'd be on our face just like Isaiah. I have nothing to bring to the table except what you give me. That's the way Isaiah felt. I'm a man of unclean lips, Lord. And God touched him and he said, here I am, Lord, send me. Number 4, we must find time to feed our inner man. Why? It's because what we feed is what grows. I have plants. I have a garden. It hadn't been much of a garden this year, has it, Tim? With everything that's been going on. But I understand and I know that when I fertilize and I water my plants, that they grow. They grow. They grow prolifically at some seasons, you know, if I just do what Tim tells me. So we want to always be feeding our inner man with the Word of God so that we can be that vessel through which the love of God and the grace of God are actually able to flow out to others. I learned a long time ago that my daily habit of spending time with God in his Word every day of my life, spending time with God, getting up in the morning, going to my chair, sitting down, reading the Word of God, to just let him speak to my personal life. It has nothing to do with developing messages or doing Bible studies for the church or some class that I'm teaching. It's just to let God talk to me, to let me get to know God. I have multiple journals that I keep. I have 3 right now that I write in. They're different. I write different things in them. And that has become the most meaningful habit of my life. I'm doing this whole series on habits. I'm going to keep teaching on habits next week. This is the most meaningful habit of my life. It's taught me in a way that only God can teach me, that I cannot give somebody something that I do not have. I can't do it. I can play the part, but I can't live the part if I don't have it. Number 5, the small things are the big things. The small things are the big things. We must be faithful in the small things before God is ever going to make us faithful in the big things. It's the small, simple acts of love that make the greatest difference in the lives of other people. Chris, I want to say to you as your pastor and as your friend, if you'll do the simple, small things for people with great love, they will love you from the very bottom of their heart. Just do the small things for them. Things that you know that they need. Just do small things. They create big results. Not everyone is called to do great things for God. That's the way life works. Not everybody that you know is called to do great things for God, but I would say that everybody that you know is called to do small things for God in a great way. Just do the small things in a great way, and people will love you. All great things have small beginnings. Number 6, what's important to God must be important to us. I've learned, and I want to say it in a way that is meaningful, hopefully to both of us, is that every day matters. Every person matters. Everybody that I meet, I don't care where I meet them, at Walmart, it doesn't matter to me. Whether it's me taking my cardio rehab and the students there that are monitoring me and helping me to get through all of this heart surgery. It doesn't matter where I meet them. I don't care if I'm in the grocery store. I don't care if I'm down at Lowe's. I don't care if I'm here at church. Everybody matters. Every day matters. I'm reading a book right now. In fact, I bought it for you, and I bought one for James this week. It's called, it's by John Piper. It says, "Don't waste your life." Don't waste your life. It's incredibly, it's a classic. He wrote it back in 2002, 2003. It's a classic book. I bought it so that both of you men could read it. Everybody that crosses our path has been made in the image of God, and they are extremely important to God. And if they are important to God, they have to be important to me. They have to become important to you. We cannot waste the days that God has given us on just enjoying worldly things. There's so many stinking worldly things out there, it just drives me nuts. People sit down and watch a football game for 4 hours and think if they stay in church for an hour that they wasted their life. Our calling forces us in a completely different direction. Your calling forces you to go upstream. You have to become a model for what's important. And what we do matters to God, so don't take any day or any person lightly. Number 7, we should never waste our struggles. Politicians say it a different way. They say they should never waste a crisis, but we should never waste our struggles. The pathway to reaching God's greatest blessing will be through our greatest struggles and our greatest fears. First, Chris, the first lesson one of the main lessons that you have to learn is that you have to see God in the struggle. You have to understand that God is the author of most of the struggles that you're going to go through in your life. And the reason that you have to see God is because every struggle has a lesson that He wants you to learn. The worst thing that you can do is to run from the difficulties and to run from the struggles that you actually have. You may be struggling in your relationship to your wife. You may be struggling in your relationship to me. You may be struggling in your relationship to somebody that you work with. You may be struggling in some area that I don't know about. There's a lesson for you to learn in the struggle. You can't run from it. Secondly, what we fear the most generally reveals where we trust God the least. There'll be things that come up. You'll just be afraid to do it. You don't really know how to live by faith. You have to live a life of faith. And when you don't want to live a life of faith, and when you just don't want to put your life on the line about something and you're worried about failing, that's probably when you trust God the least. We need to see every struggle and every fear and every battle that we have and every difficult encounter as a divine opportunity to be Christ to other people. To be Christ to other people. So don't waste your struggles. Number 8, I want to encourage you to start every day wholly devoting yourself to God. There's nothing for us as ministers, pastors, there's nothing that's more important than just being totally devoted to God. Devote every part of your body to Him, because we have very little value to God if we're not wholly committed and devoted to Him. I'm going to share with you what I do, what I feel like is so important for my life. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it my way. You don't have to do it like I do it, anything. But I just want to give you an example of what I believe that you need to do. I need to devote my mind to God. And I have to say, Lord, would you please guard my heart, guard my thoughts this day. Help me to think the way that you want me to think. Connect my mind with you and with your life in me. I want to bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Some people read that and it's like they go, are you kidding? You know, every thought that I have, bring it into obedience to Christ. And I'm going, no, God's not kidding. That's the way that God wants you to think. And you have to pray, Lord, I give you my mind so that I can think the way that you want me to think. Secondly, I devote my eyes to you. Lord, help me to only be looking at the things that are honoring to you. Thirdly, Lord, I devote my ears to you. Help me not to listen to any voice that's going to distract me from being a fully devoted follower of Christ. Don't let me listen to anybody or read anything that's going to draw me away from what it means to be fully committed to you with my whole heart. Lord, I devote my mouth to you. Please help me to only speak those words that are pleasing to you and encouraging to other people. Help me to let no corrupt word proceed out of my mouth, but only that which is good for edification, that it may minister grace to the person that hears. Every word. Don't let any corrupt word proceed out of your mouth. If it can't build somebody up, if it can't edify them, don't say it. Fifthly, Lord, I devote my hands to you. Help me to be productive. Help me to be spiritually productive today. I don't want to waste my life on doing things that are just worldly. I want to be spiritually productive with all of my life, my time and everything that I have, my resources. I want to do what matters the most, so I'm not wasting my life on what doesn't matter at all. It amazes me how easy it is for people to waste their life on things that have no value, no eternal value whatsoever. Nothing. It has nothing to do with Christ and what Christ really wants. Lord, I devote my feet to you. Please guide me to the right places and to the right people. I love divine encounters, don't you? I just love divine encounters where you just somehow show up. There somebody is, right there in front of you. God did all of this. Divine encounters are so special. And then lastly, Lord, I devote my heart to you. Would you please help me? Would you please help my heart to be moved by what moves your heart? I want your heart, Lord Jesus. Number 9. We can never be a great teacher until we first become a great student. I have pounded this. Our first calling is always to study, then teach. And then when you teach, you do what? You repeat. Study, then teach. I know you probably won't like me saying this, but I think if you're just going to develop a message that you're going to bring on a Sunday like this or a Wednesday night or whenever it may be that you're teaching, I think that, I'm just going to tell you what I think. I think it takes a minimum of at least 20 hours. That's just a guess for what may or may not be the right number. But for me, it's normally more than that. It's reading, it's meditating on Scripture, it's looking through the Scriptures, it's doing word studies, it's developing all of that residual knowledge that you have to have as a pastor if you're going to be the resident theologian in your church. But you can't do that until the Word of God has found a unique resting place in your heart, until it captivates your mind and your heart. Hey, Courtney. Number 10. These last three that I have, they are ones that I don't know. I can just say they are ones that maybe I've learned the most from. Number 10 is that God will disturb us. When you become complacent with your spiritual life, God's going to disturb you. You're not going to like it. When we're well pleased with ourselves, God's going to disturb us, and we're not going to like it. Oh, Lord, I'm doing everything you want me to do. I'm studying really hard. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I've been faithful to my church. I love my wife. I love my kids. I'm bringing them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. Everything, Lord, everything is really going good here. And God says, nope. No, you don't get it yet. When we're more fascinated with what the world offers than what God offers, God will disturb us. He should. When we love our plan more than God's plan, God will disturb us. So in the ministry, probably more so than anywhere else, there comes this, what I'd call it's an uneasiness, it's a discomfort, it's when you don't feel, when things are making you very, very uncomfortable and restless and troubling. You know, I've taught in the past that you have to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And for those of us that are pastors, I think that this is even greater, that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's God's way of getting our attention when we're not listening to Him, so we need to let God disturb us as He wants to. Number 11. This is going to sound a little awkward, but just bear with me. Just say yes. Just say yes. Whatever God wants you to do, just say yes. Jesus gave His life for us, and we ought to be willing to give our life for Him. We want God to take our life and to use it any way that He pleases. If we truly believe that God is sovereign over all things, I do. I believe in the sovereignty of God. It's one of those, between that and the incarnation and the atonement, those are the three driving truths in the Scripture that just control my life. I believe that God is sovereign over all things. It doesn't matter what happens, that God is still sovereign. That He can cause all things to work together for good to those that love God and are called according to His purpose. Well, you've been called according to His purpose, and He can work all things together for good even when it doesn't look like He can. And so, if I believe that God is sovereign over all things, then the answer is going to be what? Tell me. Yes. Say it out loud.
Yes.
It's going to be yes. We do not need to know what the details are. I don't need to know what the benefits are. Well, Lord, if I do this, how's that going to affect my family? How's that going to affect my income? If you call me to do this or to go here or whatever it is, yes. Yes, I don't have to know the details. of any of that. I don't know if the task is going to be easy or if it's going to be difficult. I can assure you that probably it's not going to be easy. It is going to be difficult. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. I'll be glad to do that. Because He's our Lord and because we know that He will always do what's best for our life, the answer is yes. Just say yes. Just say yes, Chris. Number 12. This is the hardest one. This is the hardest one. God will break us. I only had one thing I could warn you about. Is that God is going to break you. Can't tell you when, can't tell you how, can't tell you why. I can't tell you what. I can't tell you who He's going to use to do it. But He's going to break you. A.W. Tozer once said that it's doubtful whether God can bless a man greatly until He's hurt him deeply. I got so hurt recently by somebody that I love so dearly. And God just had to break me of what I wanted to do. It's never easy. God will break us of our pride and our self-sufficiency and our self-confidence. He'll break us of our stubbornness. He'll break us of every bad habit that we have. He will break us for not listening to Him. That happens all the time. God will always find a way to convince us that in His kingdom that we simply are not enough. I really want to think that I am, and I'm not. It's our brokenness. It's in this unique thing called brokenness where God allows us to grow the most and experience His greatest blessings and presence in our life. I want to say to you that there is an immeasurable blessing that cannot be found in a ministry of comfort and convenience and ease, and one that's free of spiritual conflicts. The people that God uses the most in the ministry are the ones that He breaks the most. If God's not breaking you of something in your life, you're not usable. You can't be usable. Psalm 51:17 says, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. These, O God, you will not despise. You remember the woman that went in to see Jesus with her alabaster box, and all the disciples, they were over there, they were arguing about, and she broke this box open, and it had this really expensive perfume in it, and it was so expensive, it was worth a year's wages. A year's wages. Could you imagine that? Let's say you made $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year, and you had this perfume bottle, and it cost you $60,000, $80,000, $100,000, and Jesus was here, and you went and broke it, and poured it out on him. That's exactly what she did. She broke her ointment and she poured it out on the Lord Jesus. And we too need to be broken so that we can be poured out. Chris, look at me for just a minute. God will break you. I wish I didn't have to say that. I wish I could say, well, you're just great like you are. You're not. God will break you. Let Him. You and Tracy are a very rich and precious treasure to this church. You got saved in this church. You've been faithful to this church. You've been a blessing. And it's with the utmost confidence that we today recognize your gifts and your calling. And we want to say that we're here to support you fully. As your pastor, as your mentor, as your professor, and probably the most as your friend. Just as your friend. I charge you on behalf of this church and before God that you be a man of character, that you be a man of the word, and that you be a man of prayer. I pray that God's richest blessings will be your reward. I'm going to move this. I'm going to ask, we're going to move the chairs and put them here. I'm going to ask every person in this church that wants to come down, we're going to lay hands on you and we're going to pray for you and give you a gift. Okay?